Monday, January 7th, 1985. Darkness falls over the New York City skyline. The rush hour traffic begins its wind down, and the millions of workers who travel to and from Manhattan are retiring to their homes for the night. The bustling New York City streets, not as vibrant as hours previous. But as we know, the beat goes on. A construction crew arrives to the buildings at 145, 147, 149, and 151 West 44th Street in the Times Square area of Midtown Manhattan. One building being the Lenox Hotel, a 7-story, 59-unit, single-occupancy hotel. The owners of the property had learned that in the coming days, New York City was going to put an 18-month stoppage on any demolition involving single-occupancy buildings. Single-room occupancy buildings, or SROs, were being investigated by Mayor Koch due to citywide issues with low-income residents being illegally evicted from such buildings. The buildings would then be refurbished or demolished in order to make way for large condos and office space. This moratorium was going to cause big issues for the holders of the property, and any new plans for redevelopment would be halted. In their minds, something needed to be done, and done quick. At the time, the property was in the midst of being acquired by the Macklowe Corporation, headed by Harry Macklowe. The acquisition began in March of 1984. The properties would be purchased from real estate magnate Saul Goldman, whom still held ownership of the property in January of 1985. Upon hearing about the 18-month single-room occupancy demolition moratorium, Vice President of the Macklowe Corp., John Tassi, would be tasked with securing demolition permits as soon as possible. However, securing such permits on short notice and getting the city on board would prove to be an impossible endeavor. Not only would neighboring property owners have to be given sufficient notice of the demolition, but all utilities, including gas and electric on the premises, had to be turned off by energy company Con Edison. Getting a permit was not going to be in the cards. Nonetheless, Harry Macklowe, with supposed permission from Saul Goldman, the man who technically still held ownership of the property, would still go ahead with the demolition plans. Vice President John Tassi would reach out to Eddie Garofalo, a man who with his brother Emmanuel owned Mitron Associates demolition firm. The demolition job would be handled by the Garofalo brothers, whose Mitron Associates operated out of Smith Street in Brooklyn. The Garofalo family also had stakes in numerous garbage and waste hauling companies. Those included Colt Container Service, Star Container Company, Wrap Container Company, J Container Company, and CBM Equipment Leasing and Rental Company. They were known to the city as some of the worst offenders when it came to illegal dumping. In the early 1980s, the Garofalo brothers came under investigation by New York City's environmental agencies in reference to their use of numerous vacant lots and other properties to illegally dump construction debris and other waste. The Garofalos also had strong ties to organized crime, specifically the Gambino crime family, where their cousin, Eddie Gafalo, was a made man, an integral part of Sammy the Bull Gravano's crew. Vice President of Macklowe, John Tassi, would meet with Eddie Garofalo at the site of the proposed demolition and go over exactly what needed to be done. Tassi would tell Garofalo, "Listen, Macklowe wants these buildings down tonight." Garofalo would reply, "Macklowe wants him down? I'll take him down. But you know I'm going to get arrested for this, right?" Regardless of what criminal charges might come their way, the demolition would go forward. In time, the loud boom of destruction filled the Manhattan streets. Dust and debris would permeate the air. Water started spraying from the building because it wasn't turned off, and people in the immediate area became concerned at the sight. One man being Barry Lipton, who at the time served as president of the New York Newspaper Guild. He would call the police, and soon they would arrive. They would ask Eddie Garofalo if he had a permit for what he was doing. He would say that the owner of the building went downtown to get it. In the meantime, they would tell Garofalo to stop what he was doing and wait for the building department inspector to arrive. Ultimately, the demolition would stop, and Garofalo's crew would leave the premises and the partially destroyed buildings behind. The next morning, all utilities on the property would be turned off, and the area would be secured. City officials began asking, what the hell just happened? Within a month's time, property owner Saul Goldman, prospective purchaser Harry Macklowe, as well as Eddie and Emmanuel Garofalo, would all be hit with a $10 million lawsuit by the city. On February 6 of 1985, the New York Times will put out an article profiling the Garofalo brothers and their history of illegal dumping, also mentioning the demolition of the Manhattan properties just a month prior. The article certainly didn't do the Garofalos any favors, and it gave the city residents a peek into the shady figures who operate within New York City's construction industry. In May of 1985, the Macklowe Corporation and John Tassi, the vice president of the Macklowe Corp., who met with Eddie Garofalo on the night of the demolition, would plead guilty to misdemeanor reckless endangerment, ultimately being sentenced to a conditional discharge and community service. Harry Macklowe would agree to a fine of $2 million, which would be given to the city to advance their single-room occupancy construction and maintenance projects. Oddly, he would skate free of any further charges in regard to the demolition. Saul Goldman, the current owner of the property, would be hit with perjury charges. According to Manhattan District Attorney Robert Morgenthau, Goldman lied under oath on 2 occasions, stating that he had no idea that prospective purchaser Harry Macklowe would demolish the buildings on the night of January 7, 1985. Edward Garofalo, who was listed as the sole owner of Mitron Associates, would be hit with charges including reckless endangerment and violating the administrative code. In December of 1985, Edward Garofalo would be found guilty of reckless endangerment in the second degree, with a maximum penalty of 1 year in jail and a $1,000 fine. He would also be hit with operating without a demolition permit. That charge carried 15 days in jail and a $1,000 fine. In February of 1986, Edward Garofalo would be given a sentence of conditional discharge. He would not have to go to prison. However, a fine against Garofalo and Mitron Associates was still looming, and in June of 1986, Garofalo would be fined $50,000 for his role in the illegal demolition. Saul Goldman, the property owner who was in the process of selling the land to the Macklowe Corp., would be cleared of any perjury charges against him. Ultimately, the prosecution could not prove that he did in fact have knowledge of the demolition that occurred on January 7, 1985. In the end, it seems to me that the sentences handed down were extremely light, considering the reckless nature of the demolition. With the water, the electric, and the gas still on, the wreckers narrowly avoided a huge disaster when the demo was halted. City Buildings Commissioner Charles M. Smith would later say, "I guarantee you that if they followed the building's demolition to its conclusion, an explosion would have occurred." The city must have felt the same way, because in January of 1988, Garofalo would be fined once more for his role in the demolition. This time, the fine being $1.5 million, which was handed down by Manhattan Supreme Court Justice Carla Moskowitz. In the coming years, the Garofalos would continue to be in the news due to their seemingly never-ending role in the illegal dumping of construction debris and hazardous waste. Eddie Gafalo would be indicted with others in 1987 for racketeering and illegal dumping. He would receive a sentence just short of a year, but only serve 90 days. He would be released in July of 1990. Wednesday, August 8th, 1990. Eddie Garofalo receives a call at his home in Dyker Heights, Brooklyn. He tells his girlfriend that he has to go out to meet someone. He leaves his residence and walks toward his Cadillac. Shots ring out. Garofalo falls to the floor, shot in the back of the head and ear. He's pronounced dead at the scene. 2 days later, the Daily News put out a story profiling the hit. The article mentions a federal source who states that Edward Garofalo, who was just out of prison, had been speaking to authorities investigating the illegal waste hauling industry. According to the source, Garofalo was ready to cooperate. These rumors were also being heard by organized crime figures on the streets. We would learn shortly after that the hit came out of Sammy Gravano's crew and was authorized by John Gotti, the hit being perpetrated by Sammy the Bull, Thomas Huck Carbonaro, Eddie Garofalo, Frankie Fabiano, and Little Joey D'Angelo. In 2013, Daniel Fama would be arrested and tried for his supposed role in the Garofalo homicide. The state's prosecution claimed that Fama willfully and knowingly killed and aided and abetted the killing of another person with intent to prevent the attendance and testimony of such person in an official proceeding, and to prevent the communication by such person to a law enforcement officer of information relating to the commission and possible commission of a federal offense. Essentially, the murder of someone who was in talks with the government and ready to testify about what he knew in regard to the mob's role in the illegal construction and carting industry. However, the feds had dropped the case in 2014 due to insufficient evidence, but Fama is still placed at the scene of the crime. Thomas Huck Carbonaro and Eddie Garofalo would ultimately go down for their roles in the homicide. They received lengthy prison sentences for their roles. Sammy the Bull, Frank Fabiano, and Little Joey D'Angelo all became cooperating witnesses. If you want a little more background to the story and to what might have led to the death of Edward Garofalo, you can check out these 2 uploads by Sammy the Bull, where he talks a little bit about the incident and some of the things Eddie Garofalo was involved in. As always, thank you for watching New York City Crime Spot. If you guys ever want any news articles or court records or anything in reference to what I put up on this channel, you could always email me. I don't always put the sources in the video, some of them falling behind a paywall, and it just creates a lot of problems when people click links. So, as I said now, and as I said in other videos, if you guys ever want any sources or any information about some of the stuff I talk about on this channel, you could hit me up in the email, nyccrimespot@gmail.com. Thank you for watching. Have a beautiful week.